Hey, welcome to Homestead Grown Live, the live stream and podcast home of the Homestead Grown community. Join us at community.homesteadgrown.org. We exist to help families source and produce food at scale. Our vision is to create a thriving network of self-sustainable homesteaders and small-scale family farmers, actively working towards a more resilient and sustainable food system. We envision hyper-local communities coming together to share resources and knowledge, supporting each other to grow healthy, nutritious food using natural and environmentally friendly practices. By empowering individuals and families to become producers of their own food, we strive to increase access to fresh, locally grown produce while also promoting environmental stewardship, community building, and greater self-sufficiency. This is Doug, and with me tonight, as with each and every broadcast, is the love of my life, wife, and partner in all things, Maria. Maria, are you out there?
I am here.
And can you hear me okay?
I can hear you in stereo. Okay.
How bad's the delay?
It seems better tonight than it was last week.
Good.
I'm not
I
sure
switched.
why, but
I switched the network, so we're on
oh,
the faster network tonight.
yeah,
So
it's almost right on.
good.
So,
So tonight we're going to talk. The main topic is going to be a world without grocery stores. And so what I want to do is invite you, if you are listening live, and you're listening on the Podbean app. I believe from the Podbean app, you click the little button that says join the conversation, and it gets queued up in the call-in section here, and you can participate. And this is a good participation topic. The idea here is we're going to talk about the pros and cons of grocery stores, and if we're going to kind of pretend as if there are no grocery stores, and we'll talk about what the good things about that would be, and maybe what the not so good things would be. So, Maria, if you'll kind of be thinking about that a little bit and be prepared to add to that, that's great. And if you would like to join in, uh, feel free to get in queue, and we'll get to that subject here shortly. But before we do, and again, keep in mind this is a live broadcast, but is also then produced as a podcast. So a lot of folks will be listening to this as a podcast. So forgive this commercial, if you will. But the Homestead Grown community is really what this is all about. And you can join that community. The first 100 members are considered founding members, and you are given a lifetime membership, which means you'll have all access pass to everything that's ever in the community, including any training courses, any materials that are premium materials, if there is such a thing in the future. But the idea here is the first 100 folks, as long as you are a participant and you participate weekly, then we get to share in all of the knowledge together and the resources together. So, for instance, starting in February, we'll have our first cohort for the training course, the Grow Model Food System, and that'll be free for anyone who's a founding member or anyone who's a member at that time. So, some other things that we're going to be doing in the community as time goes along, and once we get the course built, and maybe after I have a couple of passes at it and kind of refine it so that it's a higher quality, we're going to then add to the community where we'll start looking at best practices, and we'll look at benchmarking and doing our own benchmark studies. And so best practices, it's what it sounds like. Um, Basically, if you're growing the same tomato plant in essentially the same climate, and yet you produce 10 pounds more potato or tomatoes per plant than I do, then what are you doing different than me? And so those would be considered best practices. And that gives us all an opportunity to improve our own yield, whether it be from vegetables or from animals. So that's one of the things that we'll coordinate on the community. Another is the benchmark studies, and this is where we'll just simply establish um, what are good starting numbers for everything. So what's a good germination rate? What's a good uh, thinning rate, what's a good yield, what's a good um, harvest. So everything will establish what those benchmark numbers are, so that if you're just beginning and you want to compare yourself to kind of the average, you can do that. And then we would use the best practices to further improve. Another thing we'll do in the community in the not so distant future, probably within the next year or so, is we'll start designing experiments. And this is where, as a community, we'll come together and say, hey, I would like to be able to do this experiment, but it's going to take 100 trials. And since I don't have 100 years to live, what if we each did one of the trials, or use or just one of the factors, so that we could do the entire experiment within one growing cycle? And so those are we'll do that, and then I'll do the data analysis and produce a report that tells us what the end result is of our experiment. Those are just a few things that the community will do in addition to the training, in addition to just the normal sharing. For instance, this past week, I think there was a good bit of sharing around uh, baking of bread and tortillas and homemade buns and things like that. So in addition to those very practical applications, we'll also look at some of the best practices, benchmarks, and designing of experiments. Make sense, Maria?
It sure does. Yep.
Okay. Okay, my other
I'm
notes here.
disappointed that you didn't say tortilla.
Tortilla.
Yeah. I don't think you can pull off the accent. So maybe just
No.
stick to tortilla.
Yeah. Well, one day we'll have a French word, and then I can use my French accent.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Okay. So the other parts of my notes here are just the founding members maintain your status just by participating in the in the uh, in the community, by posting things that would be beneficial to others and commenting and encouraging and that sort of thing. And then just a call to, if you're hearing this as a podcast or listening live and you're interested in joining, go out and join. The whole idea behind this is the more people that we can get to start to grow more or all of their own food, the less reliant we are on corporate systems and institutions that um, could have significant sway or influence over our decisions. So I just want to encourage everyone to think about it that way. All right. Okay. So in the community, this past week, I think I posted several templates, and if you just looked at those templates, it might be a little confusing. In fact, sometimes as I went back and looked at them, I was a little confused myself. So I thought, well, let's go through and chat through at a high level what these are. And this is really module 1 of the Grow Model Food System training. So this will be part of, there's 4 pillars. And the first pillar is the plan. And this is part of the planning phase. And if you don't plan, what's it that Benjamin Franklin said? He said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So this is taking his wise advice and trying to make sure that we've thought through what it is that we will want to produce so that we can be as self-sufficient as possible. So I have with me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 templates that we're going to talk through. There will be many more than this in the actual training course, but these are the first 5 that I was able to produce in a PDF format that allowed you to fill them in. So one thing you'll see if you load these in the Adobe Acrobat, which is the PDF viewer that is on your desktop or can be on your desktop, and I believe it's free, then you can enter directly into the form, into the various fields. So if you're anything like me and you can't read your own handwriting, you can store these in text. You could save them as text and you can print them. It doesn't store it in a database. So nothing that you're doing here is stored in a database. It's simply stored on the template itself. And you can use the template over and over again, right? And we'll see very quickly why that's beneficial. So the first form, and Maria, don't let me get too long-winded here, because otherwise we'll be here for a really long time. And what I really want to do is just give a high-level overview, and then we can have more in-depth discussions in the community, or maybe we'll schedule a separate live stream in the community where we walk through these documents. But the first one is the food journal template. And the whole idea behind the food journal template is to collect data on what it is that we actually eat today. So I find myself, when I think about filling this out, I almost always want to cheat. The other day we had hot dogs, right? And I was like, I don't want to put hot dogs on there. But the reality is we had hot dogs. So this is not what you wish you ate, or what you will eat. This is what you are eating today. And the idea is you capture what the main course is, what the beverages are, desserts, and any sides. I believe that
Yeah.
should cover
So,
everything.
Doug, I think I
Yep.
would be less embarrassed about the hot dogs and more embarrassed about the like tater tots that we put in the deep fryer. Like,
Hey,
are you going to grow tater tots on a tater tot bush?
well, so what are tater tots?
Well, I realize, but that would be hard. We'd have to
I'll
look
bet you
up
there.
how to make tater tots.
And
I
with
bet we
five
would
kids,
appreciate
we
them
need.
more.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't. And there's nothing wrong with the deep fryer. Now, maybe the oil we're using is probably not the best, um, but yeah. So it's it's capturing whatever it is, right? Just being realistic. And so the idea is, if we do this for 30 days, we're going to see some patterns. You know, a lot of meals. In fact, I think in that very meal that we're talking about, we four of the seven of us ate salad that came from our hydroponic experiment. So we had a good mix. Well, not a good mix, but we had a little bit of a mix. So you'll capture that, and you'll list in the 5 stars here. You just color in how much was that meal. How did, as a general sense, how well was it liked? So if no one liked it, it's 1 star, and obviously if everyone thought it was the greatest thing in the world, 5 stars. And that way, you'll fill this out one of these sheets a day, and you can print them on front and back to save paper, or you can just keep them electronic and fill them out. But that way, at the end of 30 days, you're going to look back at this and you're going to have a really good understanding of what it is that you're eating, what vegetables you actually eat, what fruits you're actually eating. Are you consuming lots of soda, sugary drinks, or is it mostly milk and water? And you probably know these things now, but it's interesting when you look at the actual record. You'll see just how frequently or infrequently we are consuming things that maybe we think we should or shouldn't. And then the last quadrant there in the bottom right is for snacks. So there's 4 opportunities for snacks: an AM snack, a mid-morning snack, a mid-afternoon, and a PM snack. And of course, there's notes for each thing. So if there was something that specifically wanted to call out that perhaps one portion of the meal was extremely well liked, and that's why you got X number of stars, or something was really really bad, and that altered things. So anyway, that's simply for uh, to take from what we think we know to what we actually know by recording it. The count field in the upper right is simply what number of meals is this? Is this the first meal, second meal, third meal? Ultimately, you're going to go to maybe 30 at most. You might even be able to stop at 14 if you recycle things on a more regular basis. Okay. Maria, any thoughts or questions on the food journal? Or, by the way, anyone who's listening live, if you have questions, feel free to jump in as well. I'm happy to try to answer some of them now, but that's the food journal template.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay, so from the food journal, and I thought about this. I probably need to create another template, and that is the meal that we're going to try to be part of our menu plan. And so that template is missing, but the idea here is, when you go back and you look through your food journal, you're probably going to want to try to recreate meals that are more whole food than um, perhaps what it was prior. And when you do that, you're going to want to test that out. So, Maria, a good example here is, um, maybe instead of uh, using tater tots, we find a recipe to make our own tater tots, and then we try it out. And
Or I would say instead of doing tater tots, we just say, hey, let's do fresh cut fries.
there you go. That could be an alternative. But let's say we wanted to do the tater tots. We would try it out. And we would see if it worked, and if it worked, then we might want to incorporate it in a future meal. I'm guessing they're probably pretty labor intensive. Um, Heaven Hopeful has asked, maybe, or stated, maybe instead of word count, do you mean day number? It is exactly what I mean. So it's, let's say that you took the journal for 3 days and you forgot, and so you missed the fourth day, and then the next day you remembered again. So the next, instead of it being day 5, it would be day 4. So it's just the count of the pages. Yeah, and I apologize if I said word count. I did. That's not what I meant. I meant it's the count of the actual number of days. So thank you for asking. Okay, so after we try out a meal, and we say, this is a recipe. We say this is a recipe we're going to keep. We want to put this recipe in our book. That's what the recipe template is for. And the idea behind the recipe template is, and these should be shareable, and as a community we'll build these up, and so that 2 or 3 years from now, people just coming to the community will have a treasure trove that we will have worked hard for, but that's good for them, right? The idea would be they would be able to go through these recipes and say, hey, I'm going to try that one. And in the recipes, we're simply going to list the ingredients and the instructions on how to make it. So if we had a recipe for tater tots, I'm assuming potatoes would be one of the ingredients. So we would list potatoes, and the amount of potatoes for the number of servings that we would capture in the upper right-hand corner of the document. The reference code would simply be a reference for the ingredient. And you'll start to notice that I like to have reference codes for things, and you'll see how it kind of flows downhill. But we'll have a code for our ingredient, but we'll also have a season. And this is where the season and the code would be unique to the individual, depending on where you live, as to when something might be in season. But the idea here is that you put in a season code, so that if I'm as we get to the menu planning and we start thinking about meals and what we can make with things that are in season, we'll be able to go to our recipe list to help guide that. Maria, am I making sense?
You are making sense.
Okay, good. That's the recipe template. So again, we've gone from here's what we eat today, here's something that we tried, we like it, we're going to keep it, we're going to create a recipe template for it, and then the recipe templates are going to go are going to inform ingredient templates. Yeah, so Heaven Hopeful has asked, can you give an example of a code? So it could be as simple as, so a reference code could be FV7, or I'm sorry, that's for ingredients. It could be something like FD01. So fall dinner, the first recipe. The idea being my code kind of is informed by my season, and I'm kind of informing also that it's a dinner versus a lunch or a breakfast. But you can make up your own code. The coding system is could be as unique as the individual. But I like the idea of something that tells me something about that code rather than just a random number. But it could just be a one-up number. So reference code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, all the way up. But if you wanted to incorporate the season, the meal, and if there, maybe even something, if it was a specialized meal, so a low glycemic recipe or a vegan recipe or something that was a particular diet, you might put in a special code that indicates that.
What about like beef, chicken, pork? Could you group things that way, or would that not be of any benefit?
No, I think this is one of those things that as we work on this as a community and we kick the tires, if you will, and we drive it down the road a little bit, we might find that becomes of great value. I would say that if you're inclined to record it as such, go for it. It can't hurt. The worst thing that can happen is you realize that it's not serving you at all, but it's still there. It doesn't hurt anything. Make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking like, and again, maybe I am not as there as you are as far
Hmm.
as the complete vision, but I was just thinking it would be nice, if I'm looking at chicken and I'm trying to come up with a dinner recipe or a lunch recipe or whatever, if I can use those codes to search my um meals to meal plan, so that's why
Yeah,
I
no,
was
that
thinking by being able to search by main ingredients, then I'd be able to pull something like that up.
yeah, I love it. I agree. Um, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, good.
Yep. It certainly would make it easier. So if in one column you have a season, another column you have, maybe what the primary ingredient is, to a limited number, right? There's
Right.
not an. Yep. Okay. So yeah, I love it. So the next thing is that your recipes will you kind of do a little bit in backward now. So we're going to take from our recipes and we're going to create ingredient templates. Again, folks in the future, and um, as I get time, and Maria, as you get time, we should actually be creating these ingredient templates for people. The idea here is that we're going to take the ingredient, like let's say it's corn, sweet corn, just nothing else. It's just the ingredient of corn. We'll go out and we'll get the nutritional value of corn according to the USDA, and we'll all know that our corn is probably significantly better in terms of nutrition than what the USDA lists. But nonetheless, we'll have a guide and we'll paste that into the template, and then we'll have our season. So we'll know what season this particular thing, whether it's a vegetable or a fruit or a nut or an herb or a meat or a dairy, whatever it is, we'll have our season codes. And seasons don't need to be summer, fall, spring, and winter. They can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They can be whatever you want them to be. And folks who live in a more in a climate where you can grow all year round, or things that you can grow and do grow all year round, you can make the season of all. Right. So it doesn't have to be just the 4 seasons. We can break that up as much as we need to. In fact, we could break it up into the seasons to say target more so when a particular thing is harvested. Um, if we know there's a 4-week window of harvesting, then maybe we break our seasons up into 20 different subdivisions. But we'll chat through that more in detail when we start walking through the course together. February 6th, I think, is the first time we're going to start doing that. But so here we'll now have a reference code for the ingredient. Now, once we have a reference code for the ingredient, then I think we go back and we plug the reference codes into the ingredients on the recipe template that we're using. If we were the people working this 3 years from now, we would already have the recipes, we'd already have the ingredients, and we probably would already have those codes there. So we would be happy for those who blaze the trail before us. But right now, as a community, we'll build these things up and we'll build a catalog of these that we all can share. So one thing I would say is, um, if you start building these out, let's load them. I'll make a special spot for them so that we can keep them all together. And rather than creating all of them yourself, go check to make sure someone hasn't already created it, and then you could just repurpose it. You might not like the code that they've applied or the coding system, and you can change it, but you'll have the bulk of the work there. So now we have our ingredients. So we have our ingredients that feed our recipes. Okay, next, meals. So again, we have our season. I recognize that the season thing could get a little overwhelming, so we don't want to get too much of a stickler to this, because we can preserve things, right? We're going to can, and we're going to freeze dry, and we're going to dry, and we're going to freeze. Some of us might salt, smoke. Um uh, uh, what are some of the other things? Ferment, whatever the case may be. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to consume it in season, but the closer we can consume in season, the more we can consume in season, probably the better. So we can put our season there, and then we'll have a meal code, and then the meal code will be used in the next step. But in our meal, the meal code will represent what our main dish is or main dishes. So let's say you're going to have two main dishes because you have two different audiences for a given meal. Then you would list both of those main dishes, and you would list the recipe code for those dishes. Make sense? And then you would list the recipe codes for the sides, and the recipe codes for the beverages, and the recipe codes for the desserts. So at the end of the day, this meals template is basically a whole bunch of reference codes. But what it enables us to do is now we have a catalog of our options. And as we're thinking through our seasonal consumption, or just thinking through all of the options, the not approved meals, but what's the word I'm looking for? The tested and approved meals, as we're building out that catalog, we'll have it all on one sheet. So then we can take and move to the menu plan. And on the menu plan template, again, we have our date range. So we're saying this menu plan is going to serve from this day to this day. The season is, if we want to list a season, and the week. So what number of week is this in the year? Some folks might get started in February. Some might get started in June. So week 1 for each of us might be different. So the idea is week 1 through 52, right? And so we would list the day. This could be the day of the week. And then we would set out to list in the first box, is this, what is this? A dinner, a lunch, a breakfast, or a snack? So we're going to put in, is it, a B for breakfast, a D for dinner, an L for lunch, so on and so forth. And then the next box is, how many people are we serving? This can change, right? So in our house, 2 of our kids are at school for lunch. The other 3 are homeschooled. So we have more servings for lunch than we do I would say we have fewer servings for lunch than we do for dinner. So we'll be able to record the number of servings. And then in the bottom box below those 2, that's where we would put our meals code. So hopefully this is all making sense. And now we have our menu plan. I know what I'm making, for how many, for what meal, and what it is, what ingredients I need, how much of each ingredient I need, and the recipe and instructions to make it. That's a lot, right? This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. Hence the last week's discussion where we talked about slow is fast and fast is slow. We take the time to think it through, plan it out. We don't have to be perfect, because I'm a big fan. In fact, a lot of my training is in continuous improvement. The idea here is we don't want to spend the rest of our lives planning. We got to get off the ground, but this will get us off the ground, and then we can start to tweak and improve things as we go along. But it's from the menu plan and all the data that we've collected before that then will feed into our grow model templates that will tell us how many chickens we need to produce the number of eggs we need for the recipes that call for eggs, so that we have that many eggs to be able to produce the meal in the given time that the meal will be produced according to the menu plan with where we are in the year. Maria, am I making sense? And Mike in Heaven Hopeful, am I making sense?
Yes, but I have to admit we had a child visitor tiptoe through and make the dog go crazy, and so I got a little distracted there, and you have my most sincere apologies.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, no problem. I heard Willow, and thanks, Mike and Heaven Hopeful, for the feedback. So they're saying yes, it makes sense. So good. That's what that is going to be the first module in starting February 6th, where we're going to get into detail to the point that my hope is that we're going to be starting to fill these things out. So as a group, as a cohort. We're going to fill them out together. We're going to work them together, and the early groups, unfortunately, are going to suffer from the pains of my short-sightedness, something that I miss, but that's okay. We'll get that feedback. We'll make adjustments, and we'll make it better for the next group. Eventually, this will be kind of a well-oiled machine where, if there's a will to do so, we can help everyone walk their way through where it just becomes step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Of course, you got to execute on those steps, but it isn't this I have no idea where to begin, or you try to begin doing everything and it becomes so overwhelming that you stop. Okay, so that was those templates that I said that I would cover, and so now I'm going to switch gears to our main topic. We're going to go back to the idea of, imagine a world of no grocery stores. So I started to make a little list, and I think, Maria, what I would like to do is I'm going to throw one out, and then you can tell me if it makes sense, if you agree, disagree, or what your thoughts are on it, and we'll go back and forth. And if you have any that you've thought of and you want to throw them out, just let me know, pro or con, and then we'll go
All
there.
right.
And
All
then
right.
if
Can
you
I tell you what the first thing when I hear a world without grocery stores, the very first thing that came to my mind?
yes,
Okay. So for the listeners, you should know that we live in a fairly small town with a very small grocery store. Comparatively speaking, I mean, it's a standard grocery store that has a little bit of everything. Although, we do kind of joke that we must get all the food that is like close to expiring at other larger grocery stores at other larger cities, because you always have to check the dates at our little grocery store. But a world without grocery stores. So there's a cashier that works there, and she always wears these little frog mittens. I'm not sure why. Apparently, her hands get cold. But she has this habit of, she will pick up each individual item and she'll look at it, and then she'll look at me, and then she'll look back at the item, and then she'll scan it and it'll go down the belt, and then she'll pick up the next one and she'll look at it and she'll look at me, and every once in a while she'll go, is that any good? And then I have to try to be on my best behavior and say, well, yes, it's very good, because otherwise I would not buy it. Or, could you please just stop judging me for my food choices? But so when I first saw your headline there of a world without grocery stores, I was like, ooh, I could get used to that. I wouldn't have, the judgy cashier. And I could just, judge my own food choices without running them across a scanner. But anyway, sorry, that's a little off topic, but that was the very first thing that came to mind.
yeah, and I think to add to that, I think even if there's a long line, which for
she
us, she still does
still
the same thing.
She does. She will still look, and she will still look at me and judge and like assess, like, and she kind of squints at me, kind of like, oh, really? Velveeta, I don't really buy Velveeta, but that's the first thing that came to mind. But yeah, yes, organic. Are you buying organic grapes? Do you feel like you're better than everyone else? She doesn't say these things, but that's what I imagine her little thought bubble says. But
So I wonder if that says more about you than about her.
maybe. I don't know. I do judge her for her froggy gloves, but that's all right. Anyway,
Yeah. All right. Well, I
I
thought you were going to
totally
tell
got off the topic.
No, that's okay. I thought you were going to tell the flood story, which
Yeah.
is
Well, okay. So, we do have that, our little grocery store, but that little grocery store is on the other side of a river. And at least every 4, 5-ish years, we have a great flood. And I won't go into the reasons why we have a flood, but the river will flood and our town gets divided in half. Oh, I love the heaven hopeful froggy glove emojis. That is amazing. Thank you for that. Um, but when that happens, we can't get to the grocery store with the lady with the froggy gloves. So we have to kind of pretend like we don't have a grocery store, or we really have to like navigate and go to other towns the long way so that we can get there, in 45 minutes or less to buy our groceries. So we do kind of survive a little without grocery stores every 4 to 5 years. But
Yeah. So it can be done.
yes, yes,
Especially if you're planned for it. It's much easier to do. But let's pretend for this exercise that there are no grocery stores at all. And the reason I thought of this was, if what we're talking about, what if everyone did it, right? Or everyone bought into the hyperlocal economies. And so if you weren't growing your own and raising your own, at the very least, you were buying from a local farmer or a local, a hyper local grower, right? So I realize that's never going to be reality, that everyone will do anything, but let's pretend like it would. Well, naturally, it would drive grocery stores out of business. So, what are the consequences of that? Right. So it's good to think through, even though it sounds like a good idea that we produce our own food and we do it, but what are the real life consequences if there were no more grocery stores? Well, there once was a time when there wasn't grocery stores, right? In fact, the modern grocery store is probably about 100 years old, um, maybe even less than 100 years, right at about 100 years. And prior to that, you might have had everything you were going to purchase might have been in the town, but it would have been in a number of different stores. And then even earlier than that, you would have been, going from a hyper local economies. You would have been going from farmer to farmer to close the gap from what you raised yourself. But anyway, the consequences. So here's one of mine, Maria.
yes.
The pro for if there are no grocery stores. So the pro would be you're going to eat healthier food, right? So whether you're growing it or someone else is growing it, hyper local, um, they're going to be growing according to your specs, basically, because that's who you would purchase from. You're going to eat healthier food.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, well, I try to stay to the outside areas of the grocery store. The big draw to the grocery store is often the processed crap, convenience, you know, foods that, like tater tots, frozen tater tots. Um, so yeah, definitely would be forced to have healthier options unless you stockpile tater tots in your
Right,
freezer.
but you can only do that so long.
Right.
Or you become the value add hyper local source that makes the tater tots
True.
from potatoes that another hyper local source grew. And anyway, and it goes on and
Yeah.
on, right?
Gotcha.
Okay.
For sure.
So I have a con. Want me to throw out
Okay.
a con?
Yeah,
So
please.
I think you're going to end up with less selection, less variations,
Okay.
or variety, right? So if you go to the
Okay.
grocery store today, I don't think in a hyper local environment would ever be reasonable to think that there could be that much selection.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm splitting hairs, but it's like, I, all right. So you might not have like green grapes, red grapes, black grapes. I think I just made those up.
Purple.
Um, and cotton candy grapes, but I don't know. Is that what you mean by variety? I mean, because
Yeah,
grapes are grapes, right?
right. But it is less selection. Um, it's just the natural consequence of
Yeah,
not having, and the other, you're not going to have fresh grapes in Ohio in January,
sure.
right? You just won't have any grapes really in Ohio.
I remember my mom always thought frozen grapes were a tasty treat. You could freeze them.
Yeah, you can, and put them in a fruit salad.
Yeah.
Makes me think.
Yummy, yummy.
I was gonna, it makes me think of that Wiggles song. All right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Um, okay, so that was one pro and one con. Do you have anything? Did you have one you want to throw out there?
No, so Heaven Hopeful is saying that they eat less variety when they're trying to not buy from the store and do without some things. And I think, oh, they also just froze
Frozen
grapes.
grapes.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So I I think the kids would go nuts, but I swear I could eat essentially the same foods and just recycle, like I think I would be okay with having chicken once a week, beef once a week, for dinners. And I don't know. I think I'm okay with boring, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and honestly, I think it would just take transition time and
Yeah.
discipline to allow that transition time to unfold, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, and I'm wondering, Mike and Heaven Hopeful, if you find that when you're eating that less variety, the longer you do that, the less it feels restricted, is my guess. Right? It probably it doesn't. Yeah, the longer you do it, the less it seems like it's restrictive, is my guess.
Yeah.
But let's throw out another one.
Okay.
All right,
Pro
so
or
another.
con?
I'm gonna throw out a pro,
Okay.
unless you got one.
Nope, you go for it.
Okay. So I'm gonna say that it'll cost less for what you're getting. And what I mean by that is, if you're raising your own vegetables, your own eggs, your own meat, or you're securing that from a hyper local source that is organic, non-GMO, pastured, all that good stuff, or like our beef, grass fed, uh, organic, pastured. Um, you what that costs in the store is two and three times. Even if you paid yourself a salary to grow it and raise it, you're still going to save money. Now, if you compare it to the factory raised produce and meats, then you might run into a little bit more of a competitive scale. But if you're comparing it to what it is you're actually getting, you're paying a lot less.
I'd agree with that.
Oh, so Heaven Hopeful says it's boring, but we try to get creative. So I would imagine spices really make a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, you just put it with different sides or yeah, I mean different sauce. Put some, hot sauce one day. Barbecue the next.
So now we need a recipe for hot sauce. Um, so we need to reverse engineer Frank's Red Hot. Okay, so a con. I've got a con. Less convenient, right? If today if we need something, and again the idea here is that if all grocery stores went away because everyone has embraced this idea, um, and so there would be no more need for a grocery store. But one of the things that we might miss is the convenience,
Yeah.
and not being able to at 2 in the morning go get something. You'd have to actually plan for it.
2 in the morning? Who's going to the store at 2 in the morning?
I did
What?
for you. I did for you a few times.
What?
Yeah.
That must have been your other wife.
Yeah. No, that's when you were pregnant with Joey and Gavin. I still would go out really early or really late to get you stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking more of as I'm driving home from picking up the kids at school and I'm like, oh, you know what we're going to have tonight? This. I have everything I need except for I need to buy whipping cream or, you know,
Yeah.
and then you run into the store and you just grab it and then you come back out and you go home and you can make dinner. But
It's convenient.
Yep, sure is.
Okay, next, another pro. It's built-in preparedness. So it's one thing for there are a lot of folks that are uh, preppers, right? So they've got a year's supply of dried goods and or canned goods and this sort of thing. By the way, that's a great idea, and I'm going to get into why it's a great idea to have that supply. But but if that's what you're relying on, then you're relying on being able to restock that. And if you're relying on being able to restock that from an external source that isn't necessarily hyperlocal or yourself, then it's not real sustainable, right? But if you are growing it yourself and or you have agreements with hyperlocal sources, then you're living your life, your day-to-day living is prepared from a food perspective. I'll take silence as agreement.
I was reading Mike's comment as you
What's
were
Mike's comment?
finishing up there, so it was just bad timing. Well, I can tell you that the grocery store here in our town, it's never
Yeah.
fresh.
No.
It's almost never fresh.
No. No.
I
And
tried to
you,
pick out a green pepper. It was like right at Christmas time, and they were all gross. Like, not even like, these look a little aged. They were bad. And I was like, these have to be the rejects from every other grocery store ever. But
well, and I know that folks are going to think you're kidding, but I honestly do think that is what's happening. We're the
yeah.
dumping ground for all of that from
I mean,
the
I bought
machines.
rice that was expired. Like, I didn't check the date because rice is like good for like almost forever. And I got home and I looked and I was like, oh my, and it wasn't even like just expired. It had expired like 6 months prior. It's like, wow. All right. So no one else wants to hear about our grocery store woes. All right. Let's move on to the next pro
Okay.
or con. Where
So
are
the
we?
next, well, the next was a con, and here is my con, and this is one to think about. So a grocery store is insurance against a single crop failure, and I don't mean a single crop as in a corn failure or a green, but let's say you had um, a tornado in our area and wiped out us and our hyperlocal sources. So it's
Yeah.
something to consider. And here's where you start to look back at your stored supplies, and where they make a difference, right? That's why you don't rely on just what's in the ground to feed you tomorrow. You want to make sure that we're cycling through some of those stored supplies and then resupplying the stored supplies so that we have a good balance between what we're consuming in or what we're growing and raising and consuming in the current cycle versus what we had from last cycle, but always with an inventory that is a year or greater, so that not only could you survive a disaster like a tornado or a flood or um, disease or drought or what have you, but you could make it through to the next year, and preferably even into the with rationing, you could make it into another year after that. Okay, that was a con for no grocery stores, is that we wouldn't, we there's some risk there. Another pro is you know what you're getting. So this goes back to your point. I know the varieties that I planted. I know the chickens that I have. I know what I'm feeding those chickens. I know if I'm spraying chemicals. Because I don't know about you, but if it says it's organic, non-GMO in the grocery store, I kind of roll my eyes and just assume that there's some loophole that found that allows them to make those claims. That's probably a bit jaded, uh, but it in some cases it's probably true. I know there have been
Well,
folks that have been
let me
fined
tell you,
before.
let me give you one. I know this is, not exactly a fresh food organic thing, but we've tried to eliminate artificial food coloring for the kids. And we were buying ice cream and, like strawberry, like fruit flavored ice creams. And I eventually looked and there was artificial food coloring in like a strawberry swirl ice cream flavor that you would think wouldn't have artificial food coloring. But so, you know, you don't ever really know unless you study every product that you buy. And so add to the list, honey, a recipe for ice cream. Okay.
Yep. And ice creams are very easy to make.
I know,
So
I made it.
it's labor intensive, but it's pretty easy. Okay.
Yep. All
Yep.
right.
So a good example of what you're getting because you're raising it or securing it, and we're securing it in Whole Foods. Typically, probably not going to be purchasing value added or not too much value added product from others. Um, okay, so a con would be there's no cheap options when money is tight. Right now, so you go to the grocery store and you need calories. Um, and so ramen noodles, every college student's uh, staple food, ramen noodles. Well, there are no ramen noodles if the grocery store isn't there. Now, one could argue that it's good never to eat ramen noodles, so it's actually saving you from yourself. But nonetheless, I think if I'm someone who's not already predisposed to embracing this concept, I might hear of this concept and say, "Gee, sounds good," but I don't have the money or the time to do all of that. And so, if I could show them how they could have the time, or why making the time is actually beneficial, but then it comes down to a cost that, hey, I can get my groceries for a tenth of what the rest of you all are paying because I'm not buying GMO, non-GMO, and organic. So the cheaper options wouldn't be there. That would be a con. And it's a legitimate con, I think. Although you were saying earlier, I think, Maria, that maybe I haven't been to the grocery store in a while because there really isn't much that's inexpensive except for maybe ramen
I
noodles.
ramen noodles was the only thing I could come up with. I mean, maybe some like generic mac and cheese, but like everything is crazy, crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, a pro is I actually reversed this on my little chart thing here. So a pro is that there's greater satisfaction, and there's something to be said uh, for growing, raising, and producing, cooking your own meals. It just tastes better. There's just something satisfying about doing. I think it's just built into us. And if we just open ourselves up to it, it's there. And to add to that, I would say that the person preparing the meal, well, the whole value stream, right from the very beginning, if the seeds are gathered in love, planted in love, cared for in love, harvested in love, prepared in love, and served in love, I I call me crazy, but I think that the food is going to carry some of that into our bodies. Is that silly? But I honestly believe that. I think that it's the spirit in which we do all those things. I think finds its way into us through what we eat, and when our calories are, yes, we might have calories, but they're empty, um, not just of nutrition, but the whole value stream is just checking the box, pushing the button. It's all about dollars and cents. Anyway, so I
Yep.
think
No,
satisfaction.
I agree. You're right.
Okay. A con though would be there's a lot more work. But yeah, I agree, Mike. You are what you eat. Um, but you could argue that more work is actually not necessarily work. Make it a labor of love again. That it isn't work as much as it just becomes part of your family, who we are. It's part of our culture. And for the vast majority of the years that we've inhabited this planet, that's been who we are. It's only in the last, I don't know, 200-300 years probably that we've moved further and further away. Of course, obviously, modern times we're far removed from our food sources, but uh, so more work. But if I think taken in the right mindset, that work is actually a good thing. Yeah, heaven hopeful. I agree. I think they do appreciate it more, and they have to feel loved because they know that that you put your time and effort into it. Um, Not just preparing it, but in the watching that the whole cycle of the growth and harvest. um, okay, then the last thing I have here, and then of course, if anyone else has anything, and we're going on close to an hour now, so I'm starting to lose my voice too. But um, a pro is it builds community. If we are engaging in the hyper local economies, both as a provider and as a consumer, we can't help but be building and forging a relationship with numerous neighbors, and not just immediate neighbors, but neighbors that extend beyond the first ring or the second consent ring, but maybe even to the third and fourth ring of proximity. Right. So and each neighbor's doing that. So these relationships are this web of relationships, if you will, are would be fairly deep because we're relying on one another for one component or another of our food. And I can't help but think that, again, a strong community is probably a good thing. And then the con is, and I don't know, maybe this is really the same thing, but if the grocery stores are still there, there's a reliance on that on the global supply lines and distribution, which um, so I'm a Six Sigma black belt, and there's a thing called Lean Six Sigma, and then I think we actually talked about this, the just-in-time processing, where grocery stores are really, they say there's 3 days worth of inventory, and that's all, and it's what's on the shelf. There is no back room anymore where they have another, week of food to stock the shelves. That's why when you go to the grocery now, you'll see the big uh, pallet lifts moving skids of food around, and they're sitting in the aisles and waiting for someone to come stock them because the truck just delivered the food, and there will be no more food until that truck delivers again. And so uh, it is a very fragile system. When it works well, it's efficient, and it's cost effective. But if you get a ripple or two in the system, it collapses fairly quickly.
Think toilet paper during COVID.
Yeah, good reminder. Or most anything during COVID, right?
Yeah, but especially, well, toilet paper and like Clorox wipes, paper
Yes.
towels. Yeah, paper goods and cleaning supplies.
Yep. All right. Well, hey, we've gone the longest we've gone in a long, long time. I appreciate you sticking with us through the whole discussion. I appreciate you joining us each week. Um, we'll do it again next Friday. And as I produce more of the templates, I'll pass them out. We'll chat through them real quick. Again, if you have questions, if you're going to start to use them, and you have questions or ideas on you think a best practice on how to use them, share it in the community. If you're not in the community, go to community.homesteadgrown.org. That's community.homesteadgrown.org, and sign up and join us. Okay. Until next week, Maria, do you have anything else to close us out? You want to sing a
I
song?
don't. I don't. I could tell another grocery store story, but I feel like it's been enough for one night.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Good night, everybody.